Well, what happens next obviously depends a little bit on outs, and I think there'll be an understanding after this one, and probably Kirkes to be expected to arrive quite soon as well. There will be a little bit of, not necessarily having to balance the books, but certainly fund any future transfers on top of that. We weren't necessarily being expecting the first strong name to be Andy Robertson, but that's what happened over the weekend. What did you make of all that, really? Because I don't know whether a lot of us were expecting Robertson to stay and Chimikas to go, or whether that was just what we wanted. So we just sort of decided that, that was going to happen. But it's obviously got to work for the player as well. And it looks to me that maybe he's thinking, well, do I really want to be understudy to some 21-year-old kid at this stage of my career, or do I want to be playing? And do you sense from this that it's as much player-led as it is sort of club?
Yeah, I was very surprised by it, actually. I've been off the weekend, so when I sort of seen the news like everyone else on Saturday, I was a bit taken aback. Not having a chance to speak to anyone at the moment, but speaking to colleagues, I think the idea was that Liverpool are sort of waiting to see if that let's go come to the door with a proposal or whatever. So yeah, I was surprised because he was at a charity event on Thursday, Robertson and the Glen Eagles, and he was on Sky Sports, and he was talking about how he was looking to fight for his place, and he knows that the competition is always fierce at clubs like Liverpool, and he sort of welcomes it. And that sort of tallied with something he said at a charity event I was at in April, where he basically said he'd like to stay. He'd like to speak to the club about extending his stay, extending his contract, and he was ready to fight for his place, whoever was coming in. I think he said earlier this year that Liverpool have been linked with 1,000 left backs, but I think that sort of crystallised into one, hasn't it, in the last few weeks, and it is Milos Kerkez now. But you're right, 10 years as junior, in an ideal world for Liverpool, I think they would sell Tsimikas for maybe around about a quarter of what they're going to end up paying for Kerkez, and then they've got a massively experienced 31-year-old Robertson, a hugely talented young Kerkez, and then they can sort of, dovetail as and when in a sort of similar style to maybe Gakpo and Diaz this season, and then eventually Kerkez becomes the number one. Robertson gets his big send-off, and we all have that moment at Anfield and say goodbye to a legend. But I think you mentioned before we started recording, and it feels a little bit like Jordan Henderson 2 years ago, where he's maybe had a conversation where he's been told that he's not going to be playing 50 times next season, and these elite professionals, I suppose when you've been used to playing every week.
And you want to play the very biggest games.
Yeah.
So it's all really good coming in and out, but I guess his question is, when we get to a final in February, who's playing?
Yeah. And I guess it's hard for these players who are so used to being regulars to be suddenly told, well, it's not quite going to be that way next season, and I guess the mortality of your career comes on you quite quickly, doesn't it, when you hear something like that? So, yeah, I was very surprised. I hope that Atletico Madrid find an alternative for their left-back position, and Robertson just stays and he gets the glorious send-off, which isn't a given, no matter who you are, is it? So we'll see, but yeah, I am surprised, but we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot to sort of play out on it, obviously. Like you said, how serious are Atletico? They might want the player, but are they willing to pay a price that Liverpool accept, or would Liverpool look at a low offer and think, well, we'd rather keep the player for a year, because it's a year left on his contract, isn't it? So to keep him in. So it does feel like that there's, it's not necessarily all done and dusted that he is going. That sometimes you can see when these stories kind of gather pace, but maybe slightly more, likely that a few of us thought a week ago that Andy Robertson will be playing his football elsewhere. But I guess the question is sort of who else from there, because there are still links around for other players who we were more expecting to believe in this summer. With Darwin Nunez, who's still linked with Saudi, but then there were some Napoli links over the weekend as well, and Chiesa looking like he might be going back to Italy as well. Yeah,
I mean, with Nunez, I was surprised by the fact that the Saudi clubs didn't move for him before the Club World Cup started, because I think perhaps of all the nations involved in that league, they're the ones who are going to be giving it more, or treating it with more prestige than anyone else, because I think it's a good chance for them to show on the world stage that our project isn't just spending silly money for players past the best. But it hasn't happened. He's still at Liverpool. Milan. There was Milan interest in January from Nunez, but it was always very tentative. But since Sergio Conceição's, I think he got sacked at the end of the season, so he's been a little bit less sure of how interested they are, because I think he knew of the player from Portugal and was interested there. But Yeah, I think reports initially today have got Napoli and Milan as sort of fighting it out at the moment, and I think Liverpool quietly will at least make it known that they are willing to listen to offers. I think it's sort of getting into any offers territory at a certain point, because I don't think you're going to be getting 70 million from European clubs for Nunez. I think maybe you'll have to accept that you probably take a little bit of a loss on that. Particularly if Serie A clubs come in, you know, they're not massive spenders, are they, like the other clubs in Europe or other European leagues. So, yeah, we wait and see, but I still expect Nunez to leave at some stage. It's just a case of who's going to come stump up the money that Liverpool wants, or at least close to what isn't a total sort of nonsense offer.